Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a source text with a truly massive, honestly kind of intimidating scope. It's called The 365 Pillars of Radical Personal Accountability. Now, psychologically speaking, our brains actually get this little dopamine hit when we successfully deflect blame onto someone else. I mean, it feels good in the moment to not be at fault, right? But today, we're tearing down that whole architecture of excuses. If you've ever felt like your life, your career, or your relationships are just being dictated by external circumstances, well, this is going to be a phenomenal paradigm shift. The source material lists out hundreds of precise, absolutely unrelenting maxims designed to completely strip away that sense of helplessness and put you firmly back in the driver's seat of your own life. But here is the hook. Radical accountability. It isn't just one giant, dramatic decision you make on a mountaintop somewhere. As the sheer volume of this source text suggests, it's actually the sum of 365 daily micro-choices. It's the moment-to-moment reflexes you cultivate. Every single day, you're presented with dozens of tiny forks in the road where you either take ownership or you outsource the blame. And this framework demands that you choose ownership 365 times over until it literally becomes your default operating system. Okay, let's dive into this. To make all this highly actionable, we've structured these 365 maxims into a 5-step transformation framework. The ownership mindset, controlling the controllables, building accountability systems, the refusal to outsource, and finally, choosing action over comfort. Starting with phase 1, the ownership mindset. It's time to stop the bleeding.
We really need to get grounded and serious right out of the gate here, because before you can build any sort of momentum, you have to stop the bleeding. And the absolute quickest way we bleed personal power is by refusing to look in the mirror. Our natural human instinct is to deflect. We stub our toe on a coffee table and immediately want to blame whoever put the table there, or maybe even the dog. But the source text is relentless on this point. It commands us to completely stop the victim mentality, to admit mistakes instantly, and to apologize without attaching an excuse to the end of it. Think about how rare that is. How often do we say, "I'm sorry, but..." Well, that but completely erases the accountability. Radical ownership means you stop the rationalization, you stop the self-deception, and you unequivocally own your part in the conflict, no matter how much your ego desperately wants to defend itself.
To build this reflex, the text offers a really powerful, rapid-fire sequence of self-reflection questions. When things go sideways, before you start looking around the room for a scapegoat, you have to demand to know your own part. You have to ask, what did I contribute to this mess? Even if you were only 5% at fault, you take 100% ownership of that 5%. Keep that internal dialogue firing fast. Ask yourself right now, what am I avoiding? What uncomfortable conversation am I dodging? What subpar situation am I just tolerating today? This isn't about beating yourself up, it's entirely about clarity. Because the exact moment you identify what you're avoiding, you immediately know what your next action step needs to be. Let's move to and see how this builds into phase 2, controlling the controllables. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens next. Once you've accepted ownership, you have to draw strict boundaries around where you invest your energy. Wasting your emotional bandwidth on things you can't change is the absolute enemy of accountability. There's a really sharp divide here between a passive life and an active one. The victim mentality is completely defined by waiting. Waiting to be asked, waiting for permission, waiting for the perfect moment. The ownership mindset, on the other hand, is defined by initiating. It's taking the first step, deciding instead of drifting, and creating your own opportunities instead of just hoping someone hands them to you. And the difference between complaining about a problem and actually acting on it, it's astronomical. Get this, some behavioral studies suggest the average person complains up to 30 times a day. And honestly, it's often just to recruit someone else into their own helplessness. The text emphasizes building instead of criticizing, preparing instead of panicking, and repairing instead of defending. Taking action is how you reclaim your power. We absolutely have to separate our circumstances from our choices. You possess total control over your responses and your effort, period. You only have influence over relationships and outcomes. You can sway them, but you don't possess absolute control. And as for external circumstances in the past, you must fundamentally accept them. Radical accountability means obsessively pouring 100% of your focus into what you can actually control. You separate your feelings from your decisions, and you focus strictly on actionable steps. Moving right along to phase 3, building accountability systems. It's time to turn intention into reality. Look, motivation is fleeting, and willpower eventually burns out for all of us. If you want to maintain radical ownership, you have to turn that internal reflection into highly structured physical systems. The source doesn't just offer high-level philosophy, it gives us the actual mechanics to build systems that operate even when you're completely exhausted. Checklists, calendars, budgets, progress logs. Why? Because you literally cannot manage what you do not measure. By tracking your habits and making your commitments visible, you convert vague intentions into hard data. You stop hiding from your own reality. And here is the exact daily routine required to structure that reality. First, you create morning activation rituals. Just doing one difficult thing early to build momentum. Second, and I think this is brilliant, you identify tomorrow's first priority action tonight, which completely removes morning decision fatigue. And finally, you establish a daily minimum standard by ending your day with an honest review of your behavior. This loop guarantees continuous course correction. Phase 4, the refusal to outsource, protecting your agency. Okay, this is where personal accountability gets a bit aggressive. This phase is all about fiercely protecting your personal agency and refusing to hand the keys to your life over to anyone else. So, the crucial point is we must immediately stop the search for permission, approval, perfect conditions, someone to blame, or external motivation. You just cannot rely on external pressure. You can't wait for someone else to hold you accountable or for the conditions to magically align. If you outsource your discipline or your decisions, you're actively outsourcing your future. You have to maintain your principles and standards without any supervision whatsoever. I want you to just absorb this hard-hitting maxim for a second. Choosing to become the cause rather than merely the observer. That is a massive identity shift. You're no longer just watching your life happen to you from the sidelines. You're the architect. You're the engine. You are creating your own momentum and your own structure. And that brings us to our final peak, Phase 5, choosing action over comfort. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that all the mindset shifts and systems in the world mean absolutely nothing if you don't physically move. Most people think they need to feel confident or motivated before they can act. The source text flips this completely. You must take action before confidence arrives. You act despite the discomfort. You use action to actually generate the motivation. If you wait until you feel ready, you're going to be waiting forever. This is the ultimate showdown right here. Intention versus execution. The core philosophy demands that we constantly choose long-term consequences over short-term pleasure. It demands we choose truth over comfort, progress over perfection, and execution over simply intending to do something. The world really doesn't care about what you intended to do. It only responds to what you actually execute. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn the focus entirely back onto you. Think about the biggest frustration in your life right now. That one obstacle that's been bothering you all week. You got it? Now ask yourself this deeply provocative question. What am I going to do about it? Not what is someone else going to do, not what should happen in a fair world. What are you going to do about it? Because the ultimate singular takeaway from these 365 pillars is this. You hold the pen. You don't control the past, and you don't control external circumstances, but your next move is entirely yours. Stop making excuses, build your systems, and take full ownership of your next move. Thanks so much for diving into this explainer with me. Now, go execute.